I am really delighted and humbled to introduce our speaker this morning, Dr. Katharine Hayhoe. We have tried to get Dr. Hayhoe to Westmont for years, actually, but she's arguably the most prominent evangelical voice nationally and internationally in creation care right now. And it's been tough to get her, but let me begin by just quoting a recent New York Times article that featured her work. It says, Dr. Hayhoe has come to prominence in part because she's just so darn nice. She has found that she gets her science across more effectively if she can connect with people personally. In a nation seemingly addicted to argument as a blood sport, she conciliates. On a topic so contentious that most participants snarl, she smiles. She's an evangelical Christian, and she doesn't flinch from using the language of faith and stewardship to discuss the fate of the planet. Katharine Hayhoe is a national treasure. Now look, as a biologist and a lifelong surfer and backpacker myself, and somebody who cares about planet Earth, I'm really glad for the message that Dr. Hayhoe is going to bring us this morning. But there's also another reason that I'm eager to have you access someone like Dr. Hayhoe. Her visit's being funded by a grant from the Lilly Foundation, which aims to encourage reflection on issues of vocation and calling. And there are several things, as you listen to her this morning, I want you to look for. First of all, she's someone who's in her calling achieved the highest level of professional success, but remains tethered to the church and the people of God. She studied astronomy and physics as an undergrad, got her Ph.D. in atmospheric science. She has over 100 scientific publications. She's consulted with the U.S. president and leading bodies and projects all over the world. But she's here. She's here at Westmont. Has been recognized by Christianity Today as one of the 50 women to watch. And she's not only here, but she has a witness on behalf of Christ to the outside world. She wants us to care for the planet, but she communicates her message by caring about others. So she's been identified as Time Magazine's 100 most important people, Foreign Policies, 100 global leaders, PBS, NPR, Newsweek, USA Today, Rolling Stone, Good Housekeeping, even Vogue she's been featured in. But I have to say, not everyone loves her. She receives vicious hate mail, which I wish I could quote for you, but it's inappropriate at this setting. I'll just say that she receives excoriating abuse and literal death threats, and she has been somebody who has stood in. She stood in and stood up with a posture of dignity, graciousness, and love. Not hitting back, not withdrawing, the aroma of Christ in our culture. Thank you, Katharine. And lastly, she's found her call in something she loves, something that we at Westmont really want to encourage and equip you to do. She mentioned to me that she's motivated by this Paul's claim in Romans that the invisible attributes of God are clearly evident in the things that he has made. And she wants to see creation continue to, as the psalmist says, jubilantly declare the glory of God. So I want to welcome Dr. Hayhoe. I want to also tell you that she'll give another talk this afternoon at 3:30 right across the way in Winter Hall, 210, on why climate matters to us in California. So Katharine, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Jeff, for that kind introduction. And thank you, everyone, too. I know I've never been here before in person, but I feel like I am home. All of us, whether we were, 4 years old when we first went to Sunday school, or whether we came to belief in Christ later in life, one of the first things we learn is what is God's greatest gift to us. Because that's what distinguishes what we believe from other world religions. What is God's greatest gift to us? Like I said, even a 5-year-old child should know the answer to that one. God's gift to us was his son, born as a literal baby, growing to be a man, and then dying on the cross for us. Why did he die? For our forgiveness of sins. And why did he rise again? Christ rose again to give us life, spiritual life, because we had the physical life. We were alive physically, but spiritually we were dead. The essence of who we are, the essence of being born again, is receiving that spiritual life that we are given by God. Here's a question, though. Have you ever stopped to think what God's second greatest gift might be? Now, there's a lot of contenders. If you argue, that the Holy Spirit is distinct from the life of Christ, you could go for that as number 2. Or there might be some other ones. I'm going to propose one to you. And this is what I would propose. Christ died and rose again to give us spiritual life. But this planet that God created for us to live on, this unique, precious, special planet, is what gives us physical life, isn't it? It gives us the air that we breathe, the water we drink, the food we eat, the places where we live. We were not designed to float around in empty space. We were designed to live in a home that gives us physical life. And that is what our planet does for us. Let's see. I've been warned about this clicker. We're clicking. There we go. Okay. So when we look at the planet, we normally kind of picture it like this, right? This is a picture of the Earth from space. And we picture it as this pristine, untouched world, just the way God created it. But over the last few thousand years, our population has grown. We're pushing 7.5 billion people right now. And so now, a more accurate way, I believe, to look at our planet is not a picture of the planet during the daytime, but rather literally a picture of the planet at night. These are the lights of almost 7.5 billion people around the world. And if we zoom in on the United States, you can even see, and it's coming. I know it's coming. There we go. You can see exactly where we are, right? We have a huge impact on our planet. And for those of you who are good at geography, I know there's got to be a few people who take geography here, cast your eyes up to North Dakota. Most of what you look at here is cities. You can literally see cities and roads connecting the cities, but up in North Dakota, there's this kind of amorphous patch up there that is no big city. What that is that you're looking at are the lights of thousands of fracking wells. And that starts to give us a clue to how we are impacting our planet to the greatest extent today. Back in the 1700s was when we first discovered how to dig massive amounts of coal and gas and oil out of the ground and burn it. Now, many of us are familiar with the visual impacts of energy extraction on our planet. If you've ever been to the Appalachian Mountains in the eastern US, you know that they look like this, but the easiest and cheapest way to get coal out of those mountains is literally to cut the top off them. I'll never forget the first time I saw that. It was unreal. You're just going along and all of a sudden there's a mountain that is just missing its top. Why do we care about issues like this? This was an article written by a friend of mine, Marianne Hitt. We care about it, first of all, because it actually affects people. Mountaintop coal removal is poisoning Appalachia's waterways. Marianne is a believer, and she writes further here about how toxic heavy metals from mountaintop removal leach into the water, increasing the risk of cancer, heart disease, birth defects, and all kinds of other awful things. Those of us who drive a little further south to LA are very familiar with what air pollution looks like, right? Where does air pollution come from? It comes from burning fossil fuels. Why do we care about air pollution? We care about it, again, because it affects real people. Did you know that air pollution kills 5.5 million people around the world every year? In the United States, it kills 200,000 people every year. Imagine just for a second if terrorism killed 200,000 people in the United States every year. So we have an environmental protection agency, which is primarily tasked with protecting people on air quality and water quality issues, And even still, we have these types of numbers affected by a changing climate. By air pollution. And not only that, but the poorer we are, the more vulnerable we are because we cannot afford to live in places that have cleaner air. So this is where the idea of creation care or stewardship of this planet comes in. I love the message, I don't know if you do too, but I particularly like their version of Genesis 1. It says that God made us in his image. We learned that in Sunday school. But I don't know about you, but I never went to a Sunday school class where they told me why we were made in God's image. But it's right here in Genesis 1. There was a reason why you and I were made in God's image, and that reason was so that we would be able to care for every living thing on this planet. That's pretty cool, isn't it? That is our purpose in life here on this planet, according to Genesis 1. And the idea of responsibility for what we've been given goes throughout the Bible. I could list verse after verse, but I'll just give this one from 1 Corinthians, where it talks about that if we've been given a trust, and what greater trust than this planet we live on, God expects us to be faithful to it. So the idea of stewardship is kind of similar to if you've been given or inherited a farm or a piece of property. And you say, well, I want to extract every penny I can out of this property because I have dominion over this property. I'm in charge of this property and I can pull every single short-term benefit that I want out of it and then just leave it in rack and ruin behind me. We wouldn't respect anybody who did that if they inherited the family farm or the family business, would we? In the same way, we respect people who, there we go, when they inherit a business, a farm, when they inherit anything, they steward that trust. They invest in it. They make sure the land is healthy, the people are well fed, the animals are cared for. That's the idea of stewardship. But today, there's more than that. Because when we burn coal and gas and oil, it doesn't just produce air pollution that we can see. What you're looking at there coming out of smokestacks is primarily steam. What you don't see are the invisible little heat-trapping gases that are produced. Every time we burn coal or gas or oil, it produces carbon dioxide. And carbon dioxide is a heat-trapping gas. Our planet already has this amazing natural blanket of heat-trapping gases that keeps us almost 60 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than we would be otherwise. The Earth would be a frozen ball of ice if we did not have this incredible natural blanket. How does it work? The sun's energy shines down, goes almost right through the blanket like a window. The Earth heats up, like your body, and it gives off heat. And then how does a blanket keep you warm at night? It traps your body heat, right? That's what the atmosphere does to our planet. It traps our body heat, so to speak, and keeps us at just the right temperature for life. Well, if this is natural, then what's the problem with us producing more of these heat-trapping gases? We are wrapping an extra blanket around our planet. A blanket that it was not designed to have, and a blanket that we don't need. What happens if you're sleeping at night, and it's usually a grandma who does this. My grandma always did this. What happens if your grandma sneaks in at night and puts an extra blanket on you while you're sleeping? You heat up, right? You start to sweat. You say, Grandma, I didn't need this blanket. That is what we are doing to our planet. The invisible heat-trapping gases that we don't see in this picture are wrapping that extra blanket around the planet. And that's what it looks like. As a result, the planet is warming. Now, one year might be colder, another year might be warmer. It goes up and down. But over climate time scales, 20 to 30 years, the planet is warming. And we're breaking record after record. If you don't trust the thermometers, throw them out. If you don't trust the satellites, throw them out too. Because around the world, there are 26,500 natural indicators in God's creation telling us that it is getting warmer. Whether it is snowpack melting earlier in the year in the Sierra Nevada mountains, whether it's butterflies moving poleward as their habitat becomes too warm, whether it's sea level rising or glaciers melting, or invasive species moving north. God's creation is telling us that the planet is warming. One of the most frequent questions I get, though, is, isn't it just, the sun or a natural cycle? And I have a lot of stuff on my website and on my Facebook page that gets into all of that. But the bottom line is, no, we've looked at those. We've looked at those, and if it were the sun right now, we'd be getting cooler, not warmer. If it were natural cycles right now, we'd be getting cooler, not warmer as well. We know that for the first time in the history of the planet, with 7.5 billion people of us, we are actually affecting the planet. Now, you might look at this temperature change then and say, well, but it isn't that big. Why does it really matter? And it's true. If you write a book or if you make a movie about climate change or global warming, what's the number one picture you put on the cover? I'll give you a clue. It's big, it's white, and it's very furry. Yes, it is a polar bear, and it's usually a polar bear standing on a melting piece of ice, looking very sad, just like this polar bear here. And it's true, polar bears are one of the species most affected by a changing climate. But the reality is that after the polar bear, we're next. Why? Because, again, we have so many people here on this planet. We have so many people, and because we have so many people, every acre of arable land is already allocated. 2/3 of the world's biggest cities, 2/3 of them, are within just a few feet of sea level, and we expect sea level to rise a few feet during this century. If you farm cotton, for example, in West Texas, and all of a sudden, decade after decade, it gets too warm to farm cotton, and you say, well, I'm just going to pick up and move to Kansas. You can't just go take over somebody's land because somebody already lives there. If sea level goes up 3 feet and you live in Manhattan Island, you can't just say, well, I'll pick up my tent and move like you could have 1,000 years ago. You can't pick up your skyscraper and move. We care about a changing climate because we've built the vulnerability into our systems. Whether it's floods in my hometown of Toronto on the right, or floods in Bangladesh as a result of a warmer planet and faster evaporation rates. Whether it's stronger droughts in Texas, where I live on the left, or in Syria, where it drove millions of people into the city with skyrocketing unemployment rates, worsening the refugee crisis that they already have today. Whether it's stronger hurricanes, damaging our coasts and putting them at risk, or thawing permafrost in the Arctic, causing Native American villages to literally crumble and fall into the ocean, or whether it's record-breaking heat waves in Australia or India, killing thousands of people. We care about a changing climate because it affects us. It exacerbates the risks we already face today. We've always had floods, we've always had heat waves, we've always had hurricanes. But these issues are getting stronger, and that is why we care about a changing climate. Not only that, but when we look at a map of who is most vulnerable, look at which countries are most vulnerable. The places where people already live off $1 or $2 a day, and if a famine comes, if a drought comes, they can't afford to feed their family anymore. We don't just care about a changing climate because it affects us, and this afternoon we will be talking about how it affects us here. We care about it because it affects the poorest and the most vulnerable, the very people who we as Christians know that God has put in our heart to care for and to love. There aren't any verses in the Bible about climate change, but there's plenty of verses in the Bible about our attitudes and actions. This one, for example, if we have worldly means and we see a brother or a sister in need, how can the love of God be in us if we do not help them? Let us love not in word and speech, but in deed and in truth. Walk in love, the Bible tells us, just as Christ loved us. Or, in Texas, there's a special translation of the Bible that you find primarily on road signs. The Texas version says, that love thy neighbor thing, I meant it. This is a little series I do called Global Weirding on YouTube, and one of my most recent episodes was, what does the Bible say about climate change? It doesn't say anything about climate change. It was written 2,000 years ago. What do you think? But it says, like I said, a lot about our attitudes and actions that we can have in response. And they reflect directly on the gift that God has given us, because we have a new heart. We have a mind that is being renewed in line with the values that we have been given and the heart that we've been given. So the Bible tells us that the love of God has been poured out in our hearts. We already have that love in our hearts, past tense. It tells us why? So that Christ could dwell in our hearts through faith, and we are rooted and grounded in that love. And being rooted and grounded, what can we do? We can do each as we want to in our heart. This verse is often used to talk about financial giving, but personally, I feel like giving our time, our concern, our care, our prayers, that is equally, if not more important. God loves a cheerful giver from the heart. What's more, we've been called for freedom, but we shouldn't use that as an opportunity to be selfish, but rather to serve each other through love. The whole law is fulfilled in one statement, that is loving others. And that has enormous implications for our response to a changing climate. So here's the final question. The final question is, all right, you've talked about the issue, you've talked about our attitudes and our response, but what do I actually do? If you tell me to go change a light bulb, I will scream. Not going to tell you that. We're okay. Here's the cool thing. The cool thing is that we're not asked to respond with fear. God has not given us a spirit of fear, so that's a litmus test. If fear is the feeling you're coming up with, that is not from God. What is from God is power, the ability to get stuff done in love with a sound mind. It's pretty cool, isn't it? So what might that look like? This is another verse from the Message about us as a body. God's ministries are carried out everywhere, but they all come from the same Spirit, but they look different. The expressions are everywhere, but God is behind it. Each of us has been given something different to do. That's why I can't tell you, here's the one thing you should do. Because each of us is a different expression of Christ in this world. So, what are a few examples, a few suggestions, a few practical pictures of what our response can look like? One of the simplest things we can do is talk about it, because you know what? Hardly anybody talks about it. I was at a Christian college last year, and one of the students during lunch said very candidly, I don't talk to my friends about this issue at all because I'm afraid that they'd reject me. Crazy, isn't it? Talking about it is one of the things that we can do. We can take action to reduce our own carbon footprint, and I love Climate Caretakers because it's an online Christian community that helps us do it. So check them out online or on Facebook. We can take corporate action, whether it's in our church, like this one that put solar panels on its roof to serve as a community garden, or at our college. This is a college in upstate New York, 1,200 students, the biggest solar panel array of any educational institution in all of New York, and it's a Wesleyan college. That's pretty cool, isn't it? What a witness to the surrounding communities. We can help others prepare, not just here, but around the world. We can work to end the 1 billion people living in energy poverty by helping them from the endless sun and wind that God has given us. I love this picture of a solar panel on a hut in Africa. We can support organizations. Some of my favorites are Micah Challenge, Plant with Purpose, Young Evangelicals for Climate Action. But the bottom line is this: caring about God's creation, the people as well as the living things that He has created, I believe is a genuine expression of our faith, a true acceptance of our God-given responsibility, and a true expression of God's love. Because as the Apostle Paul reminds us, the only thing that really counts in our lives is our faith expressing itself through love. Thank you. Thank you for coming today. Go in peace.